Is the US government really actively hunting real living breathing giants in the Kandahar Mountains of Afghanistan? Could the Kandahar Mountains of Afghanistan really harbor a dark living and breathing secret?
I don't know what the hell I saw, and nobody ever briefed us about what it was.
Since the ancient times, stories of giants roaming the earth have been spoken about throughout history. Although, the last giants believed to have walked on earth were thought to have gone extinct during the times of Noah's great flood. But is there more to the story of giants than has ever really been spoken of before?
I think they knew what we were looking for, and I think they're aware of what's going on in those mountains.
Could these giant creatures still exist today? And is the US military actively hunting and capturing them in the Afghanistan mountains?
Hi Patriots, have you ever heard of the red-headed giant of Kandahar, Afghanistan? This is quite a story of some military people who had come across a red-headed giant, probably, I don't know how many feet tall, 20 feet, 15, 20 feet tall, huge, in a cave in Afghanistan. And they, were involved in some shooting, and they eventually brought it down, and it was airlifted by a net and eventually ended up in Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But all of the military personnel involved in that incident had to sign these NDEs, these non-disclosure NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. They weren't allowed to talk about it. Now, there was one or two that did come out under anonymity, and they had their voice changed and did talk about what happened because they felt like people needed to know. But at the time, we just got kind of a snippet of what that was, but we had no context. We didn't understand what that was, where it came from. A lot of people were thinking Nephilim, from the Bible. So when I started listening to Gene Decode, I began to learn some of the back history of where these things came from, and kind of the history of the human race and mankind and the bloodlines of Cain and how all that kind of fits together. It's nice to have more of the pieces of the puzzle. You get a better picture of how things went down in our history, and why we are here now, and why we are at war with these not fully human mankind individuals. So what I'm going to do is play for you just some segments from Gene Decode talking about the Anunnaki, how they came to the Anunnaki was a race of beings on a planet just outside our solar system. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that. There's a whole backstory there. But the Alpha Draco, those reptilian things, invaded this solar system and that one, and invaded their world and tried to enslave them. And I think they did enslave them. And they went in search of gold, because they have a lust for gold. And they came to Earth eventually after a couple of other planets. Humans were here already. We were very primitive, of course, but we were here. And what they did is they needed a slave race to mine the gold. And so they tried to use the humans, but the humans were not, they fought back. They wouldn't have it. I mean, humans have a natural lust for freedom. We know what freedom is. We know what our true purpose is, and it's not to be enslaved. So we fought and we won. And what happened was these beings, these Anunnakis, and there are pictures of these things throughout ancient history all over the place in statues and stuff. Nobody really understood why, who are these things? Now we know. I mean, why would they make these statues of these things if they never existed, right? But what happened was they needed to make a slave race, so they began genetic engineering. These creatures were very smart, and they crossed Alpha Draconian, those reptile things. I think a Neanderthal or some form of Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal, and the Anunnaki to create what we call the bloodlines of Cain. And they had impregnated or taken the womb out of Eve and removed her entire genetic genome because there was something in there that kept them from doing what they were doing. So they had to remove the God gene from Eve in order to impregnate her with this Cain-ish creature. And hence started the bloodline of Cain and the families and so forth. So from there, Jean's going to start talking about that point where the Cain bloodline started and, why we are where we are today. What happened to these people? These children of Cain that were used as slaves to mine gold became extremely angry at the human race, the non-bred, non-hybridized regular humans that were regular to the earth. And so they learned from their masters how to take over and rule over the human race. And they did it in secret for all this time. And they stuck together. They kept their bloodlines pure. You can even tell they look different. I mean, they almost have some of them almost have a reptilian look to them, to be honest with you. But some of the characteristics are they have this lust for power and gold, and that was bred into them. So it's a fascinating story. And then we're going to end up with L.A. Marsuli has a video. I took some clips from that discussing where he interviews one of the military personnel that was involved in the battle at this cave. And that's a fascinating story. So believe it or not, I don't, it's all top secret. It's not something that you hear about in regular news. There's just lots of people that they've heard the legends and they've heard what people who were there have said. The word has gotten out. And, today, as we get closer and closer to the CME event, the event is supposed to coordinate, I think, with some sort of solar event. It's waking up these things in their stasis chambers that are, I think, mostly in caves in Afghanistan and the Himalayas and places like that. They're waking up. And I think 2 have already woken up. And Jean's going to talk about that. But I think that that's one thing we need to be aware of, is that these things are out there. And some of them might be Nephilim. I don't know. I mean, we don't have the complete picture. We don't have the full story. And I myself am still trying to piece together the history of what went on this planet. And, why are we at war with these things, and why are these creatures living in the earth, and so forth. So, again, I can't confirm any of this. All I can tell you is it's a great story. If you want to take it as that, that's fine. Or continue on the research of some of this stuff. But if you look back at old ancient temples and old ancient statues from Sumerian times and before, you're going to see, you're going to start to see the puzzle pieces fitting together, because all of the ancient pictures and hieroglyphics and statues from the ancient world do depict this story. So that's the amazing thing. So again, take it with a grain of salt, until the truth is revealed. We really don't know, but it's fun to try to piece it together. So here it is. I'm going to start off with Gene talking about the history going back about 500,000 years, and then I'll finish it up with some of the modern day stories that L.A. Marzulli was able to interview these military personnel that actually were involved in this firefight. So here we go, and keep your eyes open for these red-headed giants.
Fair. These tall, at that time, the Anunnaki were over 60 feet tall, but now they're down to a mere 12 to 15 feet due to the continuing planetary atmosphere and energy destruction of their homeworlds. The tall red-haired giants came to get the vast gold on Earth and Tiamat at that time. So when they first came, 445,000 years, they came to Earth, and I'll go back through this and explain this later as I go in. And this is a statue made of how the Anunnaki looked when they came to Earth, the Anunnaki red-haired giants. Here's another rendition in stone of the red-haired giants, the Anunnaki. And some more showing their females and their males. Another statue. The Anunnaki had been taken over and used as a tool for their industrial capabilities by the Alpha Draco that uses them to this day as a tool for further conquests. After many thousands of years of war, the Anunnaki were conquered by the Alpha Draco, and they became their rulers. The Alpha Draco initially hybridized, once it conquered them, the Anunnaki so that they could inhabit and possess the upper elite kingship of the Anunnaki, and thus through infiltration were finally able to defeat the Anunnaki and utterly enslave them. Thus, they rule the Anunnaki with absolute power, authority, and ruthlessness. Here's the hybridization. Because of the radiation and pollution of the nemesis worlds of the Anunnaki, the Alpha, did you see what she wants? Of the Alpha Draco, of the Anunnaki worlds, the Alpha Draco flourish on the worlds of Nebru, Hellion, and Orgota, the three worlds of the Anunnaki in the Nemesis solar system, and now rule there with impunity in open as their gods, kings, and rulers. Draco Prime on the throne in Nebru. And as always, they're a death cult. And I've had various kings and rulers that, this is a rendition of Marduk during the time he was ruling Nebru before coming to Earth. Again, a death cult. In an effort to get out from under the oppressive yoke of the Alpha Draco, the Anunnaki came up with a brilliant plan to come to our solar system and mine the vast gold reserves on Tiamat, the primary home of the human race at that time, about 1 million years ago. They believed that getting the gold and making into Ormus, that they would be able to repair their genetic and atmospheric damage done to the Alpha Draco, and thus enable them to defeat and remove them from their solar system. So they had vast technology, and they came in ships to Tiamat and through gates. And here they are coming to Tiamat, and through vast technologies and different things. and hybridized as well under the yoke of the Draco. The humans on Tiamat at this time were at a 24-stranded genome. And although they were over 20 feet tall, they were dwarfed by the giant red-haired Anunnaki, which were over 60 feet tall during that time. So here's humans coming to trade gold to the Anunnaki. And here's the machines that they're making this gold into a monatomic form, literally goes into a one-dimensional form. So the 2 dimensions are in the etheric realm, which allows you to reseed the atmosphere of a planet and heal a species as well. So this is the Anunnaki red-haired giants presiding over the rule of human slave servants here, and the little ones. They got some slave servants that they've already hybridized and taken from humans here, and they're smaller, sitting under his throne. So humans didn't care too much. And the Anunnaki red-haired giants presiding over the rule of the Atlan is the Martian people and Mars at that time. They also presided and ruled over the Atlan, which laid Atlantis. So here's the Anunnaki in relation to the Atlan, and they're all enslaved. You can see all their hands behind their back. Finding that trade was insufficient to get the gold they wanted, they incited the nearby Martian inhabitants, the Atlan, into a conflict with the humans of Tiamat. The resulting battle finally destroyed the entire planet of Tiamat and decimated Mars. This cataclysm that took place approximately 500,000 years ago completely restructured our solar system and the features of Eden Earth into what we recognize today. Now. 4D, 5D Earth can be seen below from ISIS space station. Here's a picture from the ISIS space station of Aurora Median, in other words 4D, 5D Earth, already in orbit, already formed by the changing density of our sun. So ISIS in orbit of 3D Earth showing 4D, 5D Earth, Aurora Median Earth, in orbit behind 3D Earth. The human race took refuge on another planet in the solar system. If you remember that diagram I showed you, Eden Earth. While the Atlans built a giant space ark, the moon, and brought it into orbit around Eden Earth 445,000 years ago. So that's when Atlantis first started. They came in 3 large ships that now are under the ice in Antarctica, by the way. Another reason they don't want us to know what's down there. The Anunnaki again came to the home of the human race 445,000 years ago as well with the Atlans to mine gold. First posing as gods to the humans of Earth and became their kings and rulers. So another statue showing what they look like. They're blue-eyed. They have long beards, you can see, and they, braid their beards and their hair, mustaches, wear armor most of the time. Another statue. But after several centuries of increasingly oppressive treatment that led to the eventual total enslavement of the human race, a rebellion and war happened that resulted in what was known as the Pyramid Wars, which is the cause of the destruction of the advanced civilization known as the Uyghur, which the Chinese are still putting in camps and harvesting them, their organs and things. This war resulted in the lush rainforests that were what are now the Gobi and Sahara Desert. This condition was caused by the dropping of antimatter bombs that not only decimated the vast and advanced civilization, but caused it to rain sand for 1,000 years in those areas. This is rendition of the Pyramid Wars, which they destroyed the first pyramids, and to help try to get the human race under control, burning and looting as they went. And this is actually a game that pretty much exactly shows how it looked with the Pyramid Wars. You had vast flying machines that were actually pyramids like you see in Stargate and other type flying vessels, and you had demonics being involved as well, and necromancy and all kinds of things in their war against the humans, trying to destroy the human race. So what's left of that vast civilization? The Sahara Desert, sand for 1,000 years raining down. And the Gobi Desert, vast, vast. You can see how vast this desert is. Here's where the Sahara Desert lies on Africa, over almost all of Egypt except the ocean part, half of Sudan, over half of Chad, almost all of Niger, almost all of Libya except the ocean part, most of Tunisia, most of Algeria, parts of Morocco, the Western Sahara, Mauritania, most of Mauritania, and the majority of Mali. And then the resulting Sahara Desert is there, as you see. And then the Gobi Desert is here. You can see vast Gobi Desert, which is a good portion of Mongolia and China. The Alpha Draco, realizing humans could not suitably be enslaved at this time, and it needed to be infiltrated and slowly genetically dumbed down, set about to genetically engineer a suitable slave mining species. Since they couldn't force humans to do it, they still wanted the gold, and the Anunnaki needed it as well, but the Draco also need gold. And so they set to engineer a species to mine gold for them. Since they couldn't force humans to do it, we actually defeated them in that battle. They had 144,000 ships, all but one were destroyed. That one was crippled and sent back to Nebru. We just said, leave us alone, as a messenger. Of course they didn't. The engineering encompassed taking genetics, the genetic engineering, in other words, of Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Anunnaki, and the Alpha Draco themselves. Initially, the Alpha Draco wanted to incorporate human genetics, but found it would not incorporate, as the resulting efforts always failed. This is due to human genome blocks put on the human genome by God. The Alpha Draco abducted a human breeding pair, removed a fertilized egg from the female's womb, and hybridized what they desired. They had to completely remove the human genome first. In other words, they took all of the genetics out of the fertilized egg to be able to create this mining species for them, which was Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Anunnaki, and Alpha Draco, the perfect slave miner, one that's intelligent enough, that has in the genetics the desire for gold beyond all things, a lust for gold that's incomprehensible to humans, and a greed, and that would do the bidding of the Alpha Draco and the Anunnaki. The bloodline, thus the bloodline of Cain, known as the Illuminati 13 bloodlines, was created. Here's how they initially looked for the females. Those of royal blood, hybrids of the Anunnaki, Alpha Draconian, Cro-Magnon, and Neanderthal. So people, Zachary Sitchin says that they created humans. No, they created something, that God created humanity. This is what they created. We don't look like this. After gold was mined by the slaves, the bloodline of Cain, the Anunnaki, would beam up the gold removed from under the earth by massive stone structures. So these are made out of dolomite, which is a very, very hard stone. And it has certain qualities that allow this stone to create a microwave chamber. And so if you look at the internals of a microwave, it looks exactly like this little flower pattern. This massive structures created opposing microwaves that creates a field that a scalar field, and I'll go into that. So these stars interdimensionally shift the goal for beam up to massive ships that would then take it to the then nearby Nemesis star system, the Anunnaki worlds. So they built literally tens of thousands of these all over Africa. If you go into the work of Michael Tellinger, he shows the estimates is well over 100,000 of these structures all over Africa. And after thousands of years of being ruthlessly enslaved by their masters, the Alpha Draco and the Anunnaki, the Illuminati bloodlines of Cain learned the ways of their ruthless masters. They were able to infiltrate the human race and subtly take over all areas of human civilization and essentially rule the planet until now. The Great Awakening of the human genetics. The Alpha Draco had been able to electromagnetically shut down the human genetics from the 12 strands. So we were 24 stranded on Tiamat, and when Tiamat, the massive cataclysm and the change in orbits of the planets brought us down to 12 strands, and then they were able to suppress the Earth's ley lines and fields and really tilt Earth and all kinds of things, bring in Nebra and Nemesis and orbits that would distort, and all kinds of technologies to bring the human down until it dropped to the only two strands that we had up until the late 50s, thus allowing them to give humans their mindset, that of power, greed, selfishness, and service to self, and a hierarchical power system with Satan, their ruler and sovereign, at the top. The Illuminati 13 bloodlines began to hate humanity and blaming them for their enslavement and horrific treatment, both by the Draco, the Alpha Draco, and the Anunnaki. This vast hatred was due to their being forced to mine gold for tens of thousands of years all over Africa, because they couldn't force us to do it. So they made them to do it, and they blamed that on us because we couldn't be forced. Through thousands of years of enslavement by the Anunnaki and the Alpha Draco, the bloodlines that Cain learned the ways of their masters: enslavement, infiltration, and absolute control and total rule of the human race, which they felt was the reason for their enslavement. They completely learned to emulate their false gods of the Anunnaki and the Draco, in other words. And this included the worship of their false god, Satan, and all that entails. Adrenochrome, etc. Child sacrifice, all of it, even your own children. However, now this subtle and hidden mind control enslavement is being thrown off by the human race through the Great Awakening. This is due to the orbit of the Milky Way around its galactic core, which has at its central sun Alcyon. Alcyon is a red, infrared giant star, and it's trapped inside a black hole. As in all fallen galaxies, the stars at the center are trapped inside black holes. The energy of the central sun is forced to come out of the polar vortexes of the black hole and then spreads out of the Milky Way in a vast photon ring in the primary wavelength of that central star, infrared, that all star systems in the galaxy thus pass through every half rotation. This energy causes the suns of those systems to increase energy and density, and they then in turn send this to all their planets and the life on them. The Illuminati have named this photon belt the Masonic ring. And it is the ring of energy that is increasing the activity of the Earth's sun, that then increases the dynamics of weather on all of the planets in the system. So if you look at Mars, it used to have polar ice caps. It doesn't. There's a storm on Mars, a hurricane that's been there for a decade that's the size of Texas. The red spot has grown on Jupiter. The blue spot on Neptune has grown. So it's not having the global climate change. It's not having to do with us. It's having to do with what I just forescribed to. Thus, unless the orbit of the star systems of the Milky Way is stopped, Nothing can stop what's coming, the Great Awakening. So here's a rendition of how a star in a black hole radiates these vast beams of energy that then spread out across the solar system. So it looks like this. Sorry, it's a little blurry here, but here's our solar system getting ready to go through, counterclockwise rotating again, going in, and this is 3 days thick for the main part of the belt, but it does diffuse out. So we're already catching the energy. 1/2 rotation of the Milky Way is 125 million years. And they've actually, and here's Alcyon in the center, and they've actually already looked at Alpha Centauri, which has already passed through this, and they saw the effects of it on Alpha Centauri in the space programs. The Anunnaki have vast knowledge of the Milky Way as the servants in the war weapon of the Alpha Draco. So, of course they would, because they're part of the war weapon to go over the Milky Way by the Alpha Draco, like the Nazis do, or are now as well. So they have gone into stasis chambers to re-emerge the Anunnaki after the shift to fourth density, that passage through the photon belt causes. So there's one of the Anunnaki in the stasis chamber, waiting for the shift to finish. There's the statue I showed, the guy in the stasis saber, video of 12,000-year-old Anunnaki sleeping in stasis chamber found in Iran, ready to awaken. So they find these chambers all over the world. Different pictures, as you can see. There's the one that I had, it's gone. There's the one I showed you. So that's that one. A group of special forces were sent in to capture one of the red-haired giant Anunnaki that had its stasis chamber activated and came out of stasis, in other words, and had come out of stasis and was creating havoc and mayhem near Kandahar, Afghanistan. So I'll click on that. So this is a artist rendition, because it was classified, of what they found. And it actually, they had anesthetized it, came back, and it brought the craft down, and they had to emergency land and kill this Anunnaki. They're not very nice, and they're very aggressive. So what the military found in the desert of Afghanistan should not exist, as they say. And so this is, they had to fight it, and a few of the special forces got killed. This is an artist's rendition of going, because it's classified. This is the cave they actually pulled it out of. Again, that artist's rendition. This is artist's rendition of it in the craft, and then fighting and killing them. See if this actually plays.
Okay, so now we have some background, some history behind these red-headed giants, the Anunnaki, the bloodlines of Cain, the 13 bloodlines. At least we have some basic understanding of what that history is, although I'm sure it's, there's still way more to that. Now we're going to hear from L.A. Marzulli, and he's going to be interviewing one of these military guys under anonymity that were at the shooting scene of this giant. So here we go.
We would come back to the base, and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed what they started calling this really tall person. At first I didn't think anything of it, and then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
there's no villages around
nothing.
for miles.
Right.
So it's very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. To about 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with the ambush. But that was even odd because at the point of the ambush, he would call for maybe close air support, something, okay? There was no calls made, just off the grid. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard. Everybody.
And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was longish, past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was
so
surreal.
Now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. He's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. And our weapons components were in force. We had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving.
He talked about this giant being 1,100 pounds, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet long, and it was killed. It was apparently shot somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan, but before it was shot, it lunged at several of our troops, our soldiers. It may have even gorged somebody. It was just a bizarre story, and it just sounds like the Nephilim from the Bible. And you have to assume that the giant is not alone, that the giant is not the only being living on this planet. There's got to be a whole school of them somewhere. Maybe he's got a female mate. Maybe he's got children. Who knows? Unfortunate that he had to attack our soldiers rather than be somewhat peaceful, but I guess that comes with the territory.
Dan was dead. Okay, and Wyatt is a good man, probably one of the best men I know. Now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter. But it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. A corpse that's been around for a while.
Really fell.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell. But once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large possible human creature.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan,
How many troop members are you with?
We had 6 on my crew, and when you say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not fly into the wilderness. We actually flew into a base. I guess this thing was transloaded out of the mountains by a CH-47. But I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing. Basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds when it was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
Of course we're upset. That's a given, okay? We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted.
How many fingers?
6 toes.
Six toes.
And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
Like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly. That's what they look like.
As we showed you in the clip, the radio operator checked in and gave the report, and the unit was told to stand by as Central Command was about to dispatch 2 helicopters to them. They were told that the Giant would be loaded on one of the choppers, and then they would follow in the other chopper for debriefing. The shooter told us that when the chopper landed, they loaded the Giant into a very large cargo net. The first chopper towing a Giant left, and then they boarded the second helicopter and followed. When they returned to their base in the Kandahar province in Afghanistan, they were debriefed and told to keep all of this under wraps. They were forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which essentially would prohibit them from talking about this to anyone. It is with great reluctance on the shooter's part that he has come forward. He believes that people have the right to know what is going on this planet, that the supernatural is real, and that the startling and unsettling fact that a remnant of a legendary Nephilim are still on the earth may be true. While the shooter's story is certainly fantastic, it does corroborate Stephen Quayle's account that he published years before.
And people have a right to know about this stuff. I mean, if there are 15-footers or 18-footers roaming the planet, and our military has brought them down, I mean, we have a right as American citizens. I mean, this isn't classified military stuff. This is something that we need to know, and it points back to the biblical prophetic narrative. What are your thoughts on that?
I think here's my personal opinion. My personal opinion is if it points that the Bible is accurate, they don't want it. If it goes against Darwinian evolution, it's not to be spoken of.
So you're out in the boonies running around looking for high-value targets?
Correct.
Okay.
And we're doing those operations, and as we're getting into firefights, we're getting into different scrimmages, you want to put it that way, we would come back to the base and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed this, what they started calling this really tall person. At first I didn't think anything of it, and then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target. Well, we'd heard that they had killed this thing inside a cave, or the mouth of a cave, and it was common knowledge among the military to hear this.
Now, when you say common knowledge, what do you mean? I mean, how does that work?
Years later, to come to find out, when I had returned from Afghanistan and had met other military members that had not been there in the operations with me, if you would bring up the Giant of Kandahar, they knew about it. When you first hear it, you're thinking like, this has got to be a joke. This has got to be a hoax. But then after things go down a certain way and you keep hearing it, you start to realize it's not a joke. They kept telling us to keep our weapons high, which means normally it's 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, but they kept telling us to put it towards a man's head and put it higher. So we would question, why do they want us to shoot higher than a man's head?
That's bizarre.
It is.
Our contact said 2002 is when they shot this 15-footer or taller, and you're now in this, you know, in the service around 2005. This word has gotten out, and what I find interesting here too is that if you're going to create a hoax, I get that, but you got details: 6 fingers, red hair, double rows of teeth, 6 digits on the toes. And of course, that brings it right back into what we hear about in the biblical prophetic narrative, specifically the Nephilim. Your thoughts?
I agree. I will tell you that when I was doing my time in the service, and the stuff I saw, some of it I couldn't explain, like lights in the sky during firefights, like orbs or lights that would be the size of a softball that looked that size looking up in the sky but making weird noises. And even going to Iraq myself and being near Haditha Dam and seeing the prisoners underneath the dam, and the prisoners would scream and there would be this awful feeling underneath the dam, and then later finding out in the Bible that angels locked underneath there where it talks about.
And this Haditha Dam is the Euphrates.
Is Euphrates,
and there's
correct.
an angel supposedly locked underneath the Euphrates,
Correct.
which is released in the book of Revelation.
Correct.
That's bizarre. So you're actually at this site, and soldiers are being locked in prison underneath the Haditha Dam.
Correct.
And they're freaking out.
They were freaking out. They said they could feel it. In fact, the people who would guard them they would draw straws to see who would actually take them.
No one wanted to go down.
Nobody wants to go down. Going back to Afghanistan, we would hear these things. We would hear the locals talk about rumors of these giants.
What would the locals say? How would they talk about it?
They say that they lived in the caves and they would eat people, and
They were cannibal.
So, are these giants real? Well, we've seen some video footage. We've heard some testimony. So, there is a chance that there are these beings that are giants and they're in stasis. There is a chance. I mean, we've already heard and seen so much that's unbelievable. At this point, anything's possible, I guess. So, hopefully in the near future, we'll learn about more of the true history of this planet and, what these creatures are, what's living underground. But until then, I would stay out of those caves in the Himalayas and Afghanistan and places like that. I wouldn't want to come across a red-headed giant that is a cannibal myself. And the cannibal part, boy, that explains a lot about these Anunnaki bloodline, 13 family bloodlines, and, how they have a lust for blood and gold and that they're cannibals. Well, that explains a lot if they're like this giant. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next video. Hello, Patriots. I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who've been supporting my channel. I really do appreciate it. I couldn't do it without you. And I have a new payment platform called Stripe if you are interested in supporting the channel with a donation. And thank you again, and I'll see you on the next video.